All right, let's do this. Peanut, if you're staying in the room, no talking. Hello and welcome to the... You have to stop giggling. If you don't stop giggling, I'm in trouble. Hello and...
I'm stopping.
Oh my God. And we started our conversation this morning by being like, we don't have that much time. Okay, here we go. Hello and welcome to the PhotoWork podcast, the talky and touchy-feely version of my book, PhotoWork, 40 Photographers on Process and Practice. Hello everyone, I'm Sasha Wolf, recording from Woodstock, New York, and joined as usual by my... I just tripped on my own words. Oh man. And joined as usual by the guy who's giggling, and he'll probably cut out the first blooper where he started giggling. But let me just say that there's already been a lot of Chauvin Dalton laughter. That's yeah, I'm joined by that guy.
I don't know what you're talking about.
He is guilty, people. Guilty. Mr.
Just
Michael.
Sitting here waiting for you.
Chauvin Dalton.
Finish my name.
I swear I'm trying. Oh my gosh. Well, hello, Michael.
Hi there.
How are you?
You're back. Good. We are both very busy right now. A lot going on, but yeah, doing all right.
Good. Yeah, I'm actually settling down a bit and got to, have my first conversation in a while. And
yes.
It was a good
one. And you came back strong. Yes.
Well,
yeah.
That's the guest, but we'll get to that in a second because we do have some announcements and the show itself is a little long, so I'm going to try and keep us moving, which is hilarious. But anyway, what do we have to? You know what? I'm going to start actually.
All right.
Tonight, I am going to be, and you are going to be at Picture House in the Small Dark Room. Our sponsors for this show. We're going to be at their space. They do these wonderful events, as our listeners probably know, because we announced them. And tonight's event just started out as Raheem Fortune at Picture House talking about his new beautiful book, Hardtack. And then I agreed to be in dialogue with Raheem tonight about the book. And then it morphed into a podcast. So we will be recording it. And
is this officially our first live show?
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't freak me out.
Oh, sorry.
I'm trying not to think about it. If I seem heavily sedated, it will be because I am.
Good.
So if folks are around, I don't know if it's sold out yet, but this episode that drops today that you're listening to, the
May 23rd, 2024.
Is actually tonight, yes. So that's really exciting. And then what do you got?
Yeah, so CPW up in Kingston is doing a weekend workshop, a 3-day workshop with Andrew Moore, the great Andrew Moore, June 7th, 8th, and 9th. Yeah, I mean, this is going to be quite extraordinary. Andrew is going to be working with attendees using his 4x5. CPW has 4x5 loaners. You'll be on location working in his studio. If you've never had the chance to hide under a dark cloth and look at the world upside down and backwards, now's your chance. That's copy from CPW, and I loved it. And I think I've said that 3 times this week. I'd like to hide under a dark cloth and look at the world upside down. But
that's Michael's sedative. Yeah,
that's right. But yeah, check that out. Go to cpw.org/workshop or just, scroll down, click on workshops. I think that'll be wonderful. Andrew Moore, of course, working in the Hudson Valley. And then you make some connections with CPW and maybe become a member.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm sure that's going to be an amazing workshop. Andrew is an incredible photographer, landscape photographer, and
Yes.
an incredibly nice person and a great teacher. So the
That's right.
trifecta, yeah. Well, getting to today's show, I had a conversation with my friend Chris McCall, who is the executive director of Pier 24, which is, if you don't know, one of the premier, if not the premier place to see photography in the United States. It's on an old pier in San Francisco, thousands and thousands and thousands of square footage. They have 17 galleries.
That is astounding.
Astounding. Yeah. And it's really an incredible exhibition space that's done really unique work over the past 14 years. They will be closing at the end of this year, which is a huge loss for the community, although they will be involved in photography. The foundation, it's a nonprofit. They will be supporting other photographic endeavors and organizations. So,
yeah, the foundation will be sort of moving its energies towards grants and other things. Yeah.
I know they're very involved in San Francisco Museum of Modern Art and the De Young and other museums that are in San Francisco, as well as community and schools and whatnot. But it was really wonderful to talk with Chris. He's a beautiful person, incredibly smart and incredibly knowledgeable. And you know, at a certain point, I could see that we were going over the hour mark. And so I ended, I feel like a terrible person for doing this because it could have gone on and on and on. And I think a lot of what we were talking about is information that's, you know, valuable to people who are trying to work within the fine art photography ecosystem. So, you know, maybe we'll have Chris on again. I think there's much more that we could have gotten to.
Absolutely. And you get to so much in this episode. It's sort of like blowing my mind just trying to think about what to say about it, because I'm going to play this for my students. I want to hear this again after editing it. It's an incredible episode and so informative. And Chris not only is so well versed in the history of photography, but also the philosophy of being an artist and you know, living your life as an artist. And there's just so much in this episode that I think applies to artists at all stages of their career. It really, I can't say enough good things about this episode. Yeah,
Chris was a photographer, and, you know, we don't touch on this concept in the show, but I know Chris feels this way, and I do too, which is that, you know, when you go from making art into curating, you still are using very similar creative muscles. And Chris is a very, very creative person. So even though he's sort of coming from the curatorial side and the executive director side, he is a creator and understands the act of creation and living your life as a creator. And I think I do as well. And it's definitely in the episode. I just want to say that you texted me yesterday after you finished editing my conversation with Chris, and you said that you were going to listen to the episode again, as you just mentioned, and you've never said that before, because usually when you edit, you have to listen to the conversation many times, and you're
nothing against other conversations. It's just that when I edit, I'm listening to every syllable, every breath, every click, and you know, I take notes. You know, so the episodes are deep in my head, but this has so many. You and Chris, by the way, talk so truthfully, honestly about both the business side and the art side that I couldn't just get it all in one sitting. My first thought was, I can't wait to drive to work and listen to this again.
Yeah, that made me so happy. I have to say that was really wonderful. Well, let's get to it, and I hope folks really enjoy it as much as you enjoyed it and as much as I enjoyed speaking with Chris. And as I said, I would be really honored and thrilled to have him on again. So I think we need a part 2. So, all right, absolutely. Michael, if you don't mind, please take it away.
My pleasure. And by the way, I'll see you tonight.
Yes, I'll see you tonight.
And here is your conversation with Chris McCall.
Chris McCall, welcome to the PhotoWork podcast. It's wonderful to have you on. I think it's going to be so special and helpful for our listeners, but also I'm just really happy. I've been so looking forward to talking to you. I love talking to you. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me on. I have to say I'm a big fan of stand-up comedy, and historically in the 60s and 70s, if you went on Carson, the big thing was, do you get called over to the couch?
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm being called over to the couch right now. So it means a lot to me. I love the podcast. I love talking to you. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you very much. I remember, you and I'm sure there's many of our listeners who are going to have no idea what we're talking. Michael and I have referenced like Gilligan's Island and then realized that, I think I referenced The Odd Couple once, and
right.
We were like, had this sinking feeling that, 50% of the listeners weren't going to know what we were talking about. And maybe the same with getting called to Carson's couch. But as I always say, look it up, people.
Yeah, right.
So tell us about yourself. And as I said to you before we started recording, don't skimp, because I know you've had a really interesting journey that's landed you as the director of this incredible place, Pier 24, which is, things are changing now, but you've had this incredible 14-year run there, but much before you even got to Pier 24. So tell us about where you were born and raised and all the good stuff.
Yeah, well, I was raised in Westchester, Pennsylvania, but I was born in Spokane, Washington, and traveled a lot when I was very young because my father was in the military. And then my mom and dad divorced. I think I was like 4 and we were living in Florida. So that's when we moved back closer to my mom's family in Westchester, Pennsylvania. And that's where I grew up. I had a typical suburban childhood outside of Philadelphia. I played sports, had lots of friends in my neighborhood, and when I was about to go into high school, one of my mom's closest friend's son, Mark Dickens, had a picture on his nightstand that was a negative and a positive that he had made with a Quaker Oats pinhole camera. And I remember being kind of obsessed with it and asking him how he did it because it seemed magical. And he said he took photography at Henderson High School where I went and that I should do it. And I did my sophomore year. And I always took art classes. I was an athlete, but I also was into the arts. And that kind of that was the start of photography for me. But I kind of got bored with high school. And I really, every year, probably my junior and senior year, it was like, am I going to go to the next grade? Not because I had great grades. I just didn't show up very often. Mm-hmm. And I had great relationships with my teachers. So they always were advocates for me. And so I didn't apply to college. I took a year off. I worked at a grocery store. And it made me realize, even though I knew I would go to college, it made me realize more so that I wanted to go to college. And I only applied to one school, which was Indiana University of Pennsylvania. It's a bit of a weird name because the town's Indiana, but it's in Western Pennsylvania. And I went there for school as an accounting major. And one semester in, realized I'm very good at math, but I don't want to do it the rest of my life. And through a senior who was a psychologist, kind of put me through what do you want to do with the rest of your life experiment on me, and everything kept coming back to photography. So the next semester I found photography in the communications department and kind of went head in with it. And lucky for me, there was a great professor there, Ron Juliet, and even bigger, I met Ed Pinar there. And Ed and I have had, I think it's 30 years now, I don't know, but a relationship where we have pushed and challenged each other and educated each other in the medium. And I can wholeheartedly say without Ed Pinar, I'm not where I am today.
That's really lovely. Ed is a wonderful photographer and publisher for those who don't know. An
exceptional human being.
He is a lovely person.
Michael might be the only buddy who challenges Ed for the best laugh in the photo world. When I met Michael and talked with him, he has that same kind of joy of life that Ed has.
Yeah.
So then I did a lot in photography at the school, and they were trying to close the dark rooms, and I fought that. And I was heavily involved. My girlfriend in college tried to ban me from going in the darkroom because I would stay there till late at night. I'd miss parties. I would, I was just completely obsessed with the medium. But it was in communications, and it was not fine art. That we were not learning about Stephen Shore and Renegade Dykstra and people like that. So I returned home after college, back to Westchester, and I knew I needed to go further with photography. And a teacher at IUP, which is what we refer to it as, had suggested that I meet Larry Sultan because they saw similarities in our work. And I came out. Ed had moved to San Francisco. Larry was teaching at California College of the Arts. At the time, it was California College of Arts and Crafts. They took the C off when I was there and just called it California College of the Arts. But I came out to meet Larry and continue my education. I also applied to UCLA, Cal Arts, San Francisco Art Institute. I got into most of them, but I had met a gentleman named Stephen Goldstein out here who has an unbelievable history in the medium, going all the way back to Imogene Cunningham. And he really was the reason I went to CCA. And there I studied with Larry Sultan, Jim Goldberg, lesser known, Chris Johnson, Sue Siriglio, and really was immersed in photography and kind of got that deeper education that I was looking for. I then started teaching halfway through grad school. I have a history of overlapping jobs or things in my life. So that year where I was finishing up grad school and starting to teach was one of the busiest years of my life. I taught for 7 years at a private school here in San Francisco, the Urban School of San Francisco, photography, film, visual literacy. They really made me understand what pedagogy was and how to be a good teacher. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable experience to teach. I have the utmost respect for teachers. And then I was itching to leave, and I was planning on opening a gallery. I had met Frisch Brandt from Frankel Gallery. She was mentoring me on it because their gallery is unbelievably successful, respected. And a gentleman's name kept coming up, Andy Pilara. Katie Grandin brought him up. Frisch brought him up, that we had similar ideas about community and what to do in the photo world here. So Frisch set up a meeting. It was supposed to be an hour, and it probably went on for 3 or 4 hours talking about photography. And that was the kind of end of it as far as our communication about his space. He came to my studio. He wanted to buy some of my work. I wasn't sure how to price it because they were unique pieces. So he wasn't able to buy it. And then about a year later, I started getting called by Andy a lot. And it wasn't until later that I found out Larry Sultan and Steve Beal, who was the president of CCA, came to see the space Andy was building, Pier 24. And at the end, Andy would always ask, what do you think I should do with this space? Do you have ideas? And he'd always say, you don't have to answer now, but let me know. And my understanding is Larry Sultan's response was, I don't have an answer for you right now, but I would recommend you bring Chris McCall down here and ask him what he would do with this space. And Andy did that. And I went home that night after meeting with Andy in the space. It was a rough construction site. It was hard for me to even envision what the space was going to be because it was a dilapidated warehouse. And I went home and wrote 10 pages of notes about what he should be thinking about or do with the space. And then sat down with Frisch and she helped me edit it to 2 concise pages. Mm-hmm. And I went back to him and said, here, I emailed him and said, I can just email this to you. And he asked me to meet in person. So I went to his office. We reviewed everything. And he said, at the end, he said, well, how do you see yourself being involved? And at the time, I thought I could do his educational program. I know a lot about books. I could help him with his library. And before I could answer, he said, you know what, let me make this easy on you. I want you to run the whole space. And I think I probably looked shocked. And he said, is there a problem with that? And I said, well, just so you know, I've never worked in a gallery or museum in my life. And he asked me what my weaknesses were. I went over the weaknesses. And at the end, I said, I can tell you this, you will not find someone who will work harder than me, and I will quickly make my weaknesses my strengths. Wow. And he hired me as the founding director. And, I came in and started overseeing construction and how to learned how to oversee a big construction project like this. And then with Andy and his wife, Mary, we designed Pier 24, how it would run and operate. We were supposed to bring in guest curators, and that never happened. So I went from never curating to curating a 28,000 square foot, 17 gallery space. And I could probably go on for hours, but 14 years later, I think we're coming up on 15 for me now. I've overseen 13 shows, developed programs with CCA and Larry Sultan's honor. He passed away my first year at Pier 24. And it's just been an unbelievable learning experience over the last 15 years. And I feel very lucky to have been able to be a part of the photography world at this level.
So what, for folks who have never been to Pier 24, I've been there, so I know the answer to this, but how does it function? Because it is, I think, quite unique.
Yeah, Lee had a lot of conversations on what a space should be for photography. And part of the reason for that was we got a buffer, as with any construction project. This went on for like an additional year and a half to finish because this pier had been abandoned for so long. And some of the ideas we had were that it should be by appointment to create a quiet and contemplative space to look at art. And part of this was because Andy and Mary loved Rothko Chapel and certain private spaces that had that kind of sense of reflection built within them. We also decided that there should be no wall text, that there shouldn't be titles. At first we didn't. We kind of produced a very rough guide for people to navigate. And then later we really evolved how we presented the material. So we could actually put more material for people who come to the space within what we called our gallery guide. It could have quotes, small pieces of writing, and then all the titles for the rooms. But part of that visually, and I think we've become known for, in some areas, non-traditional hangings and kind of pushing how photos go on the wall forward. It just doesn't clutter the wall, just like having fewer people and being quiet and contemplative. Visually, it's more quiet and the work stands out. I think another unique piece of the pier is that all of the lighting is on the artwork. There is no ambient lighting. There's no daylight that comes into the space. There's no big fluorescent lights in the center of every gallery. So there's just a different feel within the space because of that, of how the artwork glows. And I think probably the biggest thing and the most generous thing is that we're free to the public, that classes come here all the time. I mean, it seems like every day there are school groups in the space. We work directly with teachers to schedule those. We give them introductions. If they, at times if they want to see work from Japan and we don't have that up, we can pull it onto what we call our waterfall in the back of the space where we can put a lot of pictures. And then as we evolved this sense of community and partnering with other institutions to do things. I have a very small staff. It's 5 people. Everybody who is here started as a volunteer. I mean, they are family to me when I say that. I love these people. A lot of times I get interviewed, articles get written about the space myself, but it's really a team effort, and the kind of passion they bring has elevated us to the space we are today. But that community aspect of partnering with and having a small staff and not being able to do, lecture programs on our own or residencies or things like this, it led us to become this community hub where we partner with these other institutions. We're involved in the decision making about the artists that come, what's happening, but they oversee kind of the functionality of the program. So I just think we are not operating as an island as many large institutions do, and we're more interested in how do we accentuate what's happening at SF MoMA, the Asian Art Museum, the De Young, and complement their programming. So
can you give the listeners 2 or 3 examples of shows? So you do usually a show a year. These are, as you've sort of alluded to, and people probably gather, very large shows, extremely comprehensive. But can you give folks, just pick a couple that you think would make particularly good examples of the type of things Pier 24 has done?
Yeah. I would say one of my favorite shows that I did was a show called Secondhand that basically looked at this, the belief that there's so many images in the world, artists necessarily do not have to make photographs themselves anymore to have a practice or make work. And when you have 17 galleries, you have this ability. I gave Eric Kessel's 3 galleries in that show because he's doing so much with vernacular photography. But I also had artists like Hank Willis Thomas, Maurizio Anziri, Matt Lips, who are all, again, working from found photographs. Daniel Gordon, who is, building sculptures from found photographs and ultimately rephotographing them in the end. 17 galleries and 17 artists allows you, we have to have these overarching broad themes, but it allows you to kind of dig deep and show different iterations of it. So Melissa Catanese was in it with her book, which was just edited vernacular photographs. But we were able to show everything that was in the book. So the other thing is that we're able to dive deep and a lot of times show complete bodies of work or substantially more than a normal institution would be, because they would have to take this 17 gallery show and kind of condense it into 3 galleries. So I think that is one good example of it. And or at least my vision with curating is that I want the artist's voice to come forward. It's the theme and the idea of secondhand and repurposing of images, I think, was something interesting that I noticed within the art world. But I still don't want to craft photographers' work to fit this very specific thing. I want their voice to come through. And the space allows for that because I can show 7 major pieces by Hank Willis Thomas. I can give Eric Kessel's 3 rooms for multiple projects. I can show all of what Melissa produced. So that's really, I think, the other thing that sets us apart is just the scale of the show. I have curators constantly say to myself and Ali Hoisline, who's my co-director, we have no idea how you guys do what you do, because they understand the scale of the show is intense and requires a lot of logistics and
of course,
production and all the kind of unglamorous sides of running an institution like this. So, and then I would say this last show I am very proud of. It's a show called Turning the Page, which has a dual meaning. The pier is closing, the foundation is shifting to a granting foundation, and the show's about books. And I've been working on this long-term project with Libby Black, who I met at California College of the Arts, making photo book sculptures for a book about photo books, because there's not enough of those in the world. And we're able to do what we always do with a lot of our shows, which is we have some heavy hitters: Renike Dykstra, Cindy Sherman, Avedon, Frank's The Americans, Fukase's Ravens. And then we have kind of mid-career artists to younger artists, and Baldwin Lee, mid-career, I would say. I don't know what point of his career he's at, because he was unknown for so long and just exploded on the scene a few years ago. Rosemarie Cromwell, Donovan Smallwood, Rinko Kawuchi, Ed Templeton, Vasantha Yoganathan. And the nice thing about this show, compared to some of the other themes we've done, like portraiture, which really kind of limits what you can show, is books open it up to, you walk from Avedon into Vasantha's room, you walk from Renike Dykstra into Rinko Kawuchi's room, you walk from Rosemarie to Baldwin's room. These are aesthetically majorly different styles and genres within the medium, but it's all pulled together around this idea of the book. And we have the books in vitrines in every room. But again, I don't even know. There's probably over 700 images in this show. And Jim Goldberg, Raised by Wolves, is coming up on the 30th year anniversary next year. He was my teacher. He has the main gallery. That room in itself is a museum show at any other institution alone.
Sure.
So, it's overwhelming when people come here for the first time. There's a lot to see. If you're local, you can come back and see the show again and dive deeper.
Yeah.
And I would just say this. I think most people know this saying, which is you can give a man a fish and feed him for a night, or teach him how to fish and feed him for a lifetime. Our goal has always been to teach people how to fish or see through exhibitions, not through reading an essay that explains how you should see, but actually through installation, presenting the work. And we always, this show is the one where we have not, but we weave vernacular work into exhibitions. We do these things, and we have regulars who come in and they sit at the front and they love to talk to us about what they've learned, what they're seeing. And when you have a space this big and you put up 700 pictures, I'd love to sit here and claim I thought of every connection that everybody's going to make, but that's just not the case. We all come from different visual backgrounds. I can reference Carson Morgan, who currently works for me, is in her 20s. I would probably have to say, do you know who Carson is? But those different visual backgrounds and histories lead us to see different things within works. And that's the power of photography that I love in our exhibitions, is that when we put up this amount of photographs, our guests are going to come to us and explain connections and ideas and things that were revealed that we'd never imagined. And that's amazing.
You know, when you were talking about all the school classes that come through, I was wondering where the focus is as far as visual literacy, because you and I have talked privately about where we are in the sort of photography, fine art photography continuum as far as how at least folks in the United States, if not the world, are relating to or not relating to fine art photography, or relating to or not relating to the type of fine art photography I personally, speaking for myself, comes out of the documentary tradition, relating to that type of work. But when school kids come through, are they being taught how to read fine art photography, or are they really subject focused?
That is individually by class. And we are not, and we don't have the staff. I mean, SF MoMA has an educational department where they're unpacking this. The Tate has a really great kind of skeleton about thinking about artwork, which, who made it, when was it made, how does it differ if it's painted by a French painter in the 1820s and I'm, an American in 2024 looking at it. It really gets starting to at the heart of visual literacy. I actually hate the term visual literacy. It's literacy at this point. If your belief is that literacy is the ability to read and write, then you're so far behind. And I think our education system is very far behind. Kids are on the internet, they're looking at things constantly, but people aren't teaching them how to look and think about photographs. I think what's powerful about the Pier when classes come here and I walk through is, for the most part, whether it's high school to grad level course, the students seem genuinely engaged with the artwork. They don't have their phones out. They're not messaging. They're not doing these things. And I think part of it is this quiet contemplative space that you walk in and you feel like you're in a new world, because there is not daylight coming in windows, and like I said, the lights focus on the work, that they slow down and the world slows down, which our world does not move slow anymore. I think when I was teaching, which you have to think is 15 years ago now, I saw a statistic that the generation I was teaching saw more images in 1 week than their grandparents would have seen in their lifetime. And that's complex and scary all at once, that they are digesting images on this level, and that at least I know the public education system has not caught up to this. And with fake news and all the stuff in our world today, it needs to. Like I said, this our space itself, I think, provides a venue for teachers to come in and explore that. And the teachers and a lot of them we have personal relationships with, they come again because it's appointments are set up. We talk to them. We give them introductions. We speak to the class if that's what they want. But they come prepared with assignments and things on how to explore the exhibition and what they want. And we get a lot of photography classes here. Every university, every high school seems to have a photo program now. So we do get a lot of universities who want their students to see prints. And when you come here, you're going to see 700 plus with 17 different artists. So I think in most exhibitions for students and the public alike, you might not like, Jim Goldberg's Raised by Wolves because it's intense and it deals with very intense issues that are, relevant today as they were back in the 80s of drug use and homelessness. But you might respond to Donovan Smallwood's work or Vasanta's work. So you have that range. It's not like going to a normal museum and if there's a solo exhibition, there's one artist to see.
Right. So this is like just a huge overarching question. You can answer it however you want, but where do you think we are regarding fine art photography? Because, you and I have talked about this again privately, and I tend to talk about it a lot with colleagues, and I get asked about it a lot as an art dealer. And in my experience, the ecosystem has shifted quite a bit.
Yep.
So how do you think about, you're not selling work, so you don't have to sort of deal with those changes, but what do you see from, even 15 years ago to now as far as how people think about what fine art photography is? So you're dealing with all these young people. Like, how do they think about, some of the icons or the people we think of? Or let me just not implicate you in my myopic vision, and I'll just claim it for myself. But, the sort of iconic photographers of the 20th century or even the 19th century from, whoever, Carlton Watkins to Ansel Adams, Dorothy Lang, Walker Evans, Roy DeCarava, etc. How do young people, in your experience, relate to that type of photography?
Well, there's two questions in there at least, if not more. But one, how do young people relate? So let me start with the question about where fine art photography is. I don't know that it's in a good place. And I don't mean to say that in this like doom and gloom situation, but how about it's not in as good of a place as it was 15 years ago?
I agree with that.
And that has a multitude of reasons for it. And not to get into the gallery kind of business side of it, but part of it is there was a pool of collectors have passed away, are older, or selling their collections now. Pier 24, Andy Pilar, Mary Pilar being part of that. It's almost shocking now to look back and realize the impact they were having on kind of the photo market and the photo world. You would almost think 10 to 15 people couldn't have that large of an impact. But I do, and I won't name names either, but there are gallerists that are dear friends I highly respect that 5 or 6 years ago started saying to me, I don't know if there is a world where a photo only gallery can exist. And I think part of it was just because there weren't those patrons that not only loved photography, but they bought from most of the galleries. So it's hard for me when I talk with young photographers and ones that specifically, let's say, dance in the area of photography that I'm most drawn to, which is documentary style photography. Because right now, and I understand it's a pendulum and tastes and styles shift, but right now it's not in that favor. And Paul Graham is a close friend and we talk a lot about photography, but he probably wrote one of the best pieces about kind of this. And I always mess up the name. I know Apple's in it, but it's like the discerning apple or something, where it basically talks about that pendulum and what's happening. I mean, I've had curators over the years say to me, you should look at this photographer. It's the type of photography you guys like. And they meant documentary style. So that's hard for me when I talk to young photographers because I don't see a market for it. I don't see collectors who go out and they don't want one Diane Arbus. They want 40. They collect in depth. I see a younger generation who looks at De Carava, Friedlander, even Sally Mann, more contemporary, and thinks those are old pictures. That's not what I want hanging in my house. So there has been a shift to a different type of photography and genre within the medium that is more successful. But inevitably, this is what happens to a medium when it grows up. When Watkins and, Muybridge and those folks were making pictures, there was zero idea of an artistic career. They were documenting national parks, scientific discoveries, whatever it was. They later were adopted into the canon of fine art photography. And then you have a generation, Friedlanders, Wessels, Arbus, that when they started photography, there was no chance you were going to make a living as a fine art photographer. They all photographed different things, whether it was jazz musicians for album covers or, they took other jobs they taught. And that's the first generation that, Hank Wessel unfortunately passed away about 4 years ago. But when he did, he was a working and living artist. He made a living from his art form. That's hard to do. I joke at times that I'm the dream killer when classes come in here, because I say to them, you're going to Hollywood and trying to be the next Tom Cruise. That's how hard it is to make a living solely on fine art photography.
I say the same thing to classes, and I joke around about being the Grim Reaper.
Yeah.
But I think, like you, I'm not doing it to be hurtful. I'm doing it because I'm trying to be protective. I think it's so important. This is why I'm jumping in and interrupting you, but it's so important to underline this, that there was a brief time where it was a little bit easier to, like in the history of photography, the period of time where it was more possible, there was a slightly better chance that you could make a living selling prints, was a very short amount of time, maybe a couple of decades, maybe 20 years, maybe 30 years at the most. And that window has closed for reasons that you're talking about, and I can talk about ad nauseum and do. But for the most part, it is so incredibly rare. And just because, and I've said this many times before, I'm sorry, listeners, but just because you can all name a handful of people who probably make a living as an artist, there are tens of thousands who are not.
Right.
So it's about percentages, and it's not a good ratio of people trying to people succeeding. And it's because there just isn't a market. People wonder, well, how do I make a living? Well, A, I represent, I don't know how many people, but I think around 15. And B, because I mostly sell now to museums who are still collecting. That is my primary, just to, open the hood and give you all a look. That's my primary way of making a living. And if I didn't have museums, I'd be in trouble, because private collecting has all but disappeared.
Right.
For primarily the type of work we're talking about, but for photography in general.
Yeah.
I personally think that has a lot to do with the loss of understanding the craft and the loss of the craft itself. That magic of being in a darkroom, of producing something, there is such a barrier to making a beautiful object that gave it legitimacy. And people are not making those objects anymore. And in fact, many people consider those objects elitist or bourgeois, whatever. And I understand that that's an argument that is very valid, and we can really discuss at great length. And I could actually take either side of that argument, quite frankly. I could argue on one side philosophically, but on the other, I would have to admit that my heart is with the object, if I was being honest.
Yeah.
That I love the object. I revere it in my heart, even if I think it's problematic, because there is barrier to that acquisition. But now that I've completely hijacked your answer, please.
I think you're 100% accurate. I'm lucky enough, the greatest gift the Piers afforded me is the ability to sit down with icons within the medium, whether it's curators like, Sandra Phillips, Ann Tucker, Sarah Greenow, and Peter Galassi, or it's photographers like Lee Friedlander, who doesn't talk a lot and go out into the world and express his ideas about photography.
Yeah.
That I've been able, and I hear personal stories. You realize how small the photo world is now, but it was even smaller 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And people talk
it's an
about,
echo chamber.
Let's take Mark Steinmetz, who I think is unbelievably underrated. He's one of the greats. I
agree.
His trilogy series is one of the best things made in photography over the last 20 years.
I concur.
He left Yale and just went out to find Gary Winogrand in LA and found him and hung out with him. And that's me going like, you know what, I'm going to quit the Pier and I don't know Paul Graham, but I'm just going to go to New York and see if I can find him, hang out and do that. But now every university has a photo program, not just the art schools, everyone. So, where you might have had a couple thousand people trying to be fine art photographers, like you said, now you have 100,000 people, and there's tons of small book publishing companies that are putting that work out into the world. But I think there's a Chuck Close quote that I love, which is photography is the easiest medium with which to be competent. Almost anybody can be competent. It's the hardest medium in which to have some sort of vision and to have a signature style. And I think that is part of it.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? And I also think it's where galleries were involved early on, is this kind of education of why certain photographers are pushing the medium forward and what they're doing. And I don't think that's the case with a lot of work being shown now. That's one of the criteria that we always look at, is how are they advancing the medium? How are they advancing the language? If you don't know the history of photography as a young photographer and I meet you and you're replicating the work of someone before, there's an issue there. Like if you're really young and you have time to kind of go back and discover it, but it's not hard for me to sit down with someone like Raheem Fortune and have a 20-minute conversation and understand how deeply he's looking at the medium and thinking about it. And I've said this in the book that I have coming out soon. In the beginning, photography is like this riddle that we're all trying to solve. And through these conversations, you feel like you get one step closer to it because we're all grappling with it. We are born and we see first, but then to express ourselves, we're given language. And photographers are trying to go back and express themselves with the visual again, and all artists. And that's a complicated endeavor. And it's what I said before, this is what happens when a medium grows up, is you're shifting from photo-only galleries to now, major art galleries are picking up one or two photographers. So instead of someone like yourself who's representing 15 or so, now there's two in each gallery. And that shift can be drawn directly back to the Dusseldorf School and that time period where photography finally kind of fully grew up, and the conversation of is photography art died with that group of artists. If someone in an interview asked me that question, I wouldn't even engage with it. I wouldn't even answer it. But within all of those complexities, you have a much smaller market. You have less education around the medium because of less photo-only galleries. And you just right now don't have that collector base. And even if it is there, they're collecting one piece from each artist, not 20, not 10, not 5. So it's just you're going to sell less. So I could rattle off quotes for young photographers, and two of my favorite are from people within the sports world, which one is Wayne Gretzky, which is you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And then the other one's from Michael Jordan. I can accept failure. Everyone fails at something, but I cannot accept not trying. So with what if you're getting doom and gloom from what Sasha and I are saying right now, the reality is it does happen. You're right, Sasha. You can name a handful of people. It's just the ratio has shifted. But when you meet a passionate young photographer or Baldwin Lee, who, comes to success later in life, there are things that stick out. And one is just this unbelievable desire to understand the medium, know its history, and figure out your place within it. And the other one goes back to that Chuck Close is within that, finding your signature style, your voice. And that's why I say Steinmetz is underrated, because he and Baldwin Lee in my opinion, have taken what I refer to as lyrical documentary, which came from Walker Evans, and they make the most beautiful and compelling portraits that do not look staged, but you are almost amazed that they were able to kind of get that moment. And I know it takes direction and they see something and they talk to the people, but I think that in that realm is where they excel and why I love those works.
Absolutely. Well, let me say a couple of optimistic things, and one is overarching. Before I say that, I will just say to folks, it's Paul's essay is The Unreasonable Apple, and I think you can find it on his website, or anyway, it's really wonderful. And I absolutely love that essay, and it's worth reading. So Unreasonable Apple by Paul Graham. Everyone should also be reading Beauty and Photography by Robert Adams, of course. Let me just say this, and I believe this with all of my heart. I don't believe in art and commerce, which is strange coming from an art dealer, but I don't. So I think it's great if people can sell some work and help pay for their child's college fund, or go on vacation, or continue to buy the supplies they need, or pay for their health insurance, or get their house painted, whatever it is they do with that change. But you should be making art because you love making art. Right. And the fact is that if you're preoccupied with sales, you've put yourself in a terrible position. So the good news is that, in a way, the fact that the market is not in a great place right now, actually, I think puts photographers, artists in an excellent place, because they should let go of that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with teaching 10 months out of the year and photographing 2 months out of the year. It doesn't matter how much time you put in. It just matters, how rigorous your practice is when you are practicing. And you can be thinking about photography all year long and only making work sporadically, and that you still will be growing. So in the big picture, to me, there's nothing bad about it. The fact that they got so intertwined at one point when sales were really up was actually more problematic. I saw many artists start to really become preoccupied with chasing sales, and that corrupted their practice. So I'm not trying to be Pollyanna. I really believe this. What we want is people to go out and, with the intention and passion of breaking the world down into small abstracted pieces, otherwise known as a photograph, to share with us, the viewers, so that we may learn something about the way that person is experiencing the world that might touch us. That's what it's about, period, the end, as far as I'm concerned. So
no, I agree.
That's my lecture.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, expressing an idea, telling a story, conveying a message, obviously craft is involved with it. You think the object, the print, the photograph has to look great. I think any medium, you're constantly working on your craft and understanding the struggle. The struggle with photography is it's forever shifting with technology, unlike, traditional painting, let's say. But no, I agree. I think what you said is true, is that it's just the numbers are different, but part of the numbers being different is there's just more programs within the world that are putting hopeful photographers out in the world. And I'm not going to get into this, but some of them the teachers don't have a certain level of understanding of, let's say, the commerce side, and they're building up expectations that are unrealistic for students. That's where the struggle hits. And I mean, as an artist, you have to be comfortable with depression. I mean, I just talked to Alejandro Cartagena about this, who, is an artist himself, but also works with a lot of artists. And it's like, I call it the roller coaster. It shakes out 99% of people who want to be a musician,
absolutely,
a photographer, a painter. It's like, you're going to think you're great. And 2 hours later, you're going to think, what the hell was I thinking? I'm an idiot. My work is, derivative, it's not good, this. And then a week later, you're going to think you're great again. And then 20 minutes later, you're going to go, what am I thinking? This isn't good. And that roller coaster of emotion and doubt and at times depression because things aren't going your way, or you just, and I think this is the hardest part, you don't take time to kind of sit in your victories as much as you take time to sit in your failures.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And look, I'm a firm believer that, and it goes back to the Michael Jordan quote, and I could probably rattle off a bunch more. Failure is inevitable. Mm-hmm. In the dedication of the book I have coming out, I thank my mother and my sister. And one of the things I say is because they taught me not to fear failure. Because you're going to fail. And failure looks different for each person, but I don't think enough people take time. And I see this with important photographers, in the icons, let's say, not just important, but icons, where they put a book out, it gets a little traction. They don't get any museum shows out of it, which they would love. Maybe if they have a gallery, they get a gallery show. But instantly, within 6 months, it's like, what's next? What am I working on? And it's like, sometimes it's like, live with the new book, live with that experience, and appreciate the fact that you get to have a book, that you get to have an exhibition, that you get these things. And when we go to Chico, and I talk to people, because the people that are coming to do the reviews are not happy with the way their careers go. And this is the worst expression. I'm not suggesting anyone use it, because I think I came up with it, and the religious world would probably not be happy if they knew I was saying this. But I always say there are 1,000 photographers that would push a nun in front of a bus to get to where you are right now. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is, like, pushing a pedestrian's one thing. Pushing a nun is a next level evil to get there. But I mean, that's the reality, is we all get so caught up in our own lives and our own journey that you rarely take a step back and look at it from a distance and realize,
absolutely, what you've accomplished.
And the other people would love to have 1/10 of what the success that you're having. And I get
absolutely.
I won't name names, but I get photographers all the time that are icons who will contact me to ask me for help with getting a gallery, with doing this. And it's like, I can't help you with that. I don't know how that works exactly. There's so many different variables that lead up to this. Those are lifetime relationships. And Sasha, you and I have talked about this, because we both have a similar approach. I work with artists a lot and have a small side company that does that. But it's a holistic approach. I am not just helping these artists get into museums and think about their current project they're working on and give them feedback on work. I'm talking to them about a divorce they're going through, their kids going to college, their family member passing away. And it's just this relationship that requires to dive deeper with individuals, to be on that journey with them.
Absolutely.
And I wish I could do it for more people, but we all have a limited amount of help that we can put out into the world, or relationships that we can truly have on that level. And I'm going to give one public service announcement that it just made me think of for this, which is, single mothers are superheroes. My mom says to me constantly, I don't know how you got to where you got. And the simple answer is, Faye McCall helped me get there, because she taught me the value of community. She modeled for me creative thinking. She modeled for me what interpersonal relationships, empathy, and loyalty look like with people. And those skills pay off for me way more, and I use them on a daily basis compared to anything I learned in undergraduate and graduate school. And that it's those interpersonal skills
very moving.
That are invaluable to me. So, I mean, talk to people, find your photo nerd group that gives you that support, find the people you can rely on to work on things. That's what's important, are surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals who are on the same journey as you, and also are looking out for you in the same manner that you're looking out for them.
Amen. I completely agree. And that's beautiful. And I feel that way about about my mother's impact on me. Before we wrap up, which unfortunately we have to do, I want to talk about your book. I've been lucky enough to see it, and it's phenomenal.
Thank you.
I lost time when I was looking through it and was late for somewhere I had to be. So I fell down the rabbit hole of the book. It was, well, please tell people about it and then they'll understand why I fell down the rabbit hole. But it makes you start looking things up, and it pushes a lot of buttons. So tell us about it. When's it coming out? Who's publishing it? All that good stuff.
So lucky for me, I'll start with publishing. Lucky for me, a lot of publishers wanted to publish it. But when we landed on a photo book show for the final exhibition, Andy Pilara said, I want to publish this for the show. So we're publishing it through Pier 24 Photography. Allie Hoisline pushed it. I would have never gotten the ball over the line. She pushed it to the finish line. And her with our head of operations, Rye, who's a print master, kind of worked on all the files and everything that goes into making a book. This is not a complex book. It goes back to me going to CCA and having these kind of in-between moment conversations with Larry Sultan, because I was making a body of work that I always referred to as a book. And he said, you're doing these installation type projects. Why do you always refer to this as a book? And it was basically because the lineage of photography that it fell within, Meyerowitz, Shore, Eggleston, I had only known as books. And I never saw an exhibition of it. And he went, you know what? You're right. That all of our histories are through looking at books. And then that predated any of this scholarship around photography. And we continued the conversation. And Martin Parr started doing books on books and all of these things. But during that time, and this was 16 years ago, I said, Larry, this is all great, but I'm more interested in what the great photographers think are good photo books. Not that Martin isn't, but Martin wears many hats. And in that role, he's kind of like a curator anthropologist of looking at these books. So I was teaching at a high school in San Francisco, and Frisch Brandt gave me Robert Adams' address, and I wrote him and said, I want to start collecting lists of photo books from photographers. Would you make a list? And I'm not kidding. 6 days later in the mail, I received a letter back with a list and quotes about photo or books, and this really nice letter from Bob Adams. And then slowly over the last 16 years, I've collected, obviously 15 of those I've been at the Pier, so I don't have the amount of time I should to be doing those things. And I accumulated them. And then I brought Libby Black in, who toured me around CCA when I went there. And she's a painter sculptor. She was in Larry's class, and I sat in on her thesis critique. And she really, essentially introduced me to Larry that day. And we've remained friends since. And I just wanted a book that was playful and not this like encyclopedic big book that all the photo books are about. So the book has
you succeeded.
54
yeah, your book is just
lists.
delightful. Yeah.
It has a little short introduction by me. I adore Vince Aletti. His role and impact on the photo world is more profound than most of us understand, but he wrote a nice essay and made a list himself. But each photographer's list might have something they wrote short or something I pulled from our correspondence, very short, a few sentences, and then a list of 18 to 15 books that inspired them, influenced them. They just think needs recognition. I left it very open-ended so they could craft it the way they wanted. And then Libby's sculptures illustrate 1, 2, or 3 of the books because we made more sculptures for this exhibition. Her sculptures are at the beginning of the exhibition. But I just think I'm always so fascinated about a photographer's lineage and where they place themselves. And I think part of it is I expect Frank's The Americans and The Surprise was Fukase's Ravens are the 2 top books listed. But I'm more curious that Hank Willis Thomas has Rinko Kawuchi book on his list, and that those contemporaries are looking at each other. And sometimes the stylistically, the genres within the medium that they operate in are so different, but they're looking and curious about these people making books. And it's why for as many books that come out now, and it's a lot, I love books. They have deeply impacted what we do at the Pier because it's a way for us to see the complete body of work. And again, lyrical documentary, it's about the body of work, not always individual images, although obviously there's iconic individual images. And that's where I think the book is democratic. When it's done and it's affordable, you can have the complete set and live with it. And look, if Mark Steinmetz listens to this, know that for the last several months, the books that I've been looking at are your books, because I'm trying to understand. There is a clear shift in his work from when he's out in LA with Winogrand to that trilogy where he develops a voice that is truly unique to him. And that's what I do. I look and I look and I look and I try to understand and see where that shift, and understand when and why his voice became so clear. And I think that hopefully this book, which has 54 artists in it, from Graciela Iturbide to Rinko Kawuchi to Hank Willis Thomas to Donovan Smallwood and Lee Friedlander and Henry Wessel, so the range is unbelievable of generations and styles of photography. Is that you can look through this and see kind of what inspires what other people are looking at. And hopefully as a young photographer, you're doing the same and you have access to books, because they are, compared to most other mediums, a significant community within themselves, within the photo world. So I'm just excited that I have a book that kind of, in a hopefully fun way, adds to this lineage and dialogue around the photo book as an art form.
Absolutely. Yeah, mission accomplished.
And I would say one last thing, Sasha.
Please.
Your book, I love too, PhotoWorks. And I think my book has a similar feel, which is like, let's get into the minds of these great photographers that are doing stuff about their practice. Yours is a lot more specific. My buddy Ed Pinar's in it. He says the first photo book he saw was Wolfgang Tillman's Berg, which he saw in my apartment in Indiana, Pennsylvania, 20-some years ago. But it's those moments. I think that those are the books that I love. And this podcast is part of that. So this is I know we're wrapping up here, and this is my second public service announcement that I'm going to make during this, which is, if you are listening to this and you've listened to any of these podcasts, which I've listened to a lot of them, please donate to PhotoWorks. It's an unbelievable resource. It's free education, in my opinion, to be able to sit down and listen to Ben Brody or Jim Goldberg or Baldwin Lee or whoever has been on recently, or dive back in to 20 episodes ago and listen to another photographer. I've contributed to PhotoWorks. I hope all of you out there listening will do the same. It's an unbelievable resource. Thank you, Sasha and Michael, for what you do, Chris, and your contribution to the photo world. Because I'm not kidding. I feel like I'm on Carson. I think this is a very important podcast for the medium. So thank you for doing what you do.
Oh, my God. I'm going to cry. Thank you so much for saying that. It was really beautiful, and I'm really genuinely so moved, especially coming from you, who I just revere. Well, just tell me quickly, when is the pier officially closing, so I know how much time I have to get out there?
The plan right now is that it will close at the end of January in 2025. And then, I'm officially out of a job in July of 2025 as we move everything out and kind of help the Polaras transition into their granting foundation, which is what they will be doing.
I think you'll be out of a job for exactly how long you want to be on vacation.
Yeah, which will be hopefully 6 months to a year, so I can visit a bunch of photographers and friends that I have not gotten to in the last 15 or so years. So.
Well, I think that the guest room at my place in Woodstock, I think the bed is long enough to accommodate your extremely long frame. Chris looks like a basketball player. Yeah. And I hope you make a stop here, but if not, I'll make a stop there. I'm going to try and come out anyway. I really want to see you, spend time with you and Allie, and come, be at the pier before it closes. So I hope I will see you there. And thank you again so much for spending time with me today. As I said, I was so looking forward to speaking with you. I love talking to you. I just pounded my fists on my legs when I said that. I love talking to you. So
Well,
thank you.
The feeling is mutual. I will definitely come and stay in the guest room. And I hope you come out to visit and see this last show. I will just say, very few times in my life, I've had about a 5-year runway knowing this was going to shut down at some point. I honestly believe this is the best exhibition we've ever done. And it feels really nice to be able to, go out on top. So I hope people come visit and see this show. And
I think they will.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel the same way. I love talking with you. If ever you want to talk more, I will always be available. So. Oh
yeah, you'll be on again. Okay.
Great.
We'll have a great day and more soon.
All
okay.
Right. Thanks,
bye.
Sasha. Bye.
PhotoWork with Sasha Wolf is a production of the PhotoWork Foundation. Executive producer is Sasha Wolf, and the associate producer is Taylor Selsback. The show is also produced and edited by me, Michael Chauvin-Dalton of Real Photo Show. Music is by J. Walter Hawks. If you like the show and wish to find out more about the Foundation, please visit photowork.foundation and be sure to subscribe and review with all the stars on your listening platform.